So we'll take it right from the top. And one thing that's been included with this daily practice phase 3 program is something that's also available on the YouTube channel, which is proofing, this perspective of proofing. Now, we don't need to go into this too deeply because I feel that the resources there are quite comprehensive. And for example, we have one video that's dedicated to talking about the perspective of proofing, and then, of course, some context and ideas that you can use to proof the main articulations and joints of the body. So the only thing I really want to say with this is, although it is a general type of checking of the articulations of the body, and everyone is different, both with regards to structurally and their movement past, present, and what they anticipate to be their movement future. While this is different, and it should, because of that, necessarily be an individualized type of exploration, I would always encourage people to return to those resources now and then, if you're using that particular proofing context, to check some of the specific concepts and contexts that are given. So, for example, what I often see when I give these to people is they've gone through the resources, they've had a look at it, and then I review a submission of their proofing after some weeks. And it's not to give a criticism, because you can't really criticize someone's self-checking. But however, sometimes I feel like they're not exploring all of the context to how they could be. So just as a brief example, when we look at something like squat proofing or proofing of low gait, one of the really fundamental ideas here that I would encourage everyone to explore, because it's fundamental to movement through space, and then we can speak about locomotion. It's something that, if you've ever, for example, visited a class or a workshop with Tom Vexler, he has his own very fine context related to this, and the numerous ones I've been to, he's presented it again and again. So it's obviously something that was quite significant. And it's this idea of weight shifting. So I propose it as weight shifting. The idea, quite simply, is that we have fundamentally bases of support that we could use. So if we were going to use the most immediate examples, we would say there were 4. So we have 2 feet, 2 hands. These are bases of support. So of course, when I'm walking, I've got 2 bases of support, and my mass, my weight, is traveling and passing through space over these placing and replacing bases of support. And this is something that it really, really can't be practiced enough. And again, it seems so simple. We have other bases of support. You can use knees, you can use backs, elbows, everything can become a significant base of support. However, just sticking with the hands and the feet, for example, when we're working in the squat, I'm specifically, quite deliberately shifting my weight here, left foot to right foot. I see how it absorbs into my next support, which is here. I'm bringing myself into the floor, mapping. This idea, again, is also a concept that is spoken about in the perspectives for proofing as mapping, for example, of the backside. Checking where the edges of your range of motion are. And these are things that when you're using these proofing contexts, it would just be good for you perhaps to check back every now and then to see if there's perhaps a context or a concept that you didn't quite dig into fully. Because proofing is a really, really, really rich idea, the idea that I just check my joints. But at the end of the day, we still need some kind of context and an idea to work with. Some people just have such an awareness, they can just go through their body, just work certain things and check everything at one time. When we're introducing ourselves to this idea, giving ourselves permission to proof the body, like, what, I can just kind of wiggle around like this? Yeah, you can. But it is often helpful to have a frame there as well, a movement frame. So the frame, for example, with low gait proofing, we spoke about one of the concepts as a drawing shapes in space. So this is something I would encourage you to work with. So whether we're in like a frontal plane here or whether we're shifting sagittally, I'm drawing with a pencil, different sizes, smaller, larger. This is just a very simple, essentially an impro cue, an improvisational cue. And then the other main concept with that, again, was I place a base of support here, somewhere quite far. It pulls me into my lowest of low gait positions. And I shift my center of mass, and I feel almost okay here. It's like 80-20 with regards to weight distribution. 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, 50-50. And I just notice this as I'm moving through. And this is essentially just building awareness. I place a base of support somewhere else. I shift. I notice how the joints are feeling, how the knees are feeling. I shift again. One thing I would like to add, which I often include in classes now, when we're working through proofing of low gait and the squat, are simple rotations. So what this essentially means is that what I've generally found is when you're shifting in low gait or in a squat, it's very conducive to adding a transverse rotation. So transverse rotation, of course, is working in this plane here. So just because of the fascia and the structure and the pulling of the body, when I pull myself here, it wants to swing around. We just have this nice little arcing pattern, which what I refer to as a low gait spin. A low gait spin, if we were putting words on it. So just as an example here, I'm actually proofing my squat, shift the base of support. I can use the hands, a little spin. That's nice. I come back again to the other side. This will turn into because I'm turning this way now, it will turn into a front side low gait spin. And if you want to kind of add the expansion and contraction of it, because the squat, this is our most compressed and contracted form, I can just really open the leg out. And then when I work with this low gait spin, stretch that leg around and pull it back in. I can go full 360, find myself back into the floor. And this is essentially how you could, for example, even mix low gait proofing and also squat proofing at the same time. Taking little steps, you can be whoop, whoop, spinning on the ball of the foot, always working on the ball. It has less surface area. It's a better pivot area. In the beginning, you might want to wear some socks if you're exploring this, but over time, the sole, the ball of the foot, it will kind of build some callus. But if you're not using that all the time, nothing wrong with using socks. So yeah, that's just what I'd like to touch on briefly with proofing is have a look back at some of those resources, because some of the finer details, which are essentially just other things for you to explore, can easily be overlooked. Good. Yeah, and that's enough for proofing. One of the other things that we had in this specific program, which were not featured in other ones, and some of these resources, again, they're available on the YouTube channel with regards to soft tissue care, and specifically using tools, the SMR, self-myofascial release, using things like a roller, got them back here, roller or a ball, or I presented a few other things. You can even use one of these popular speakers, fits the bill. Now, the reason I've actually become a lot more, I say, promoting these very, very basic tools is precisely because that's what they are. They're really, really basic tools. And I consider them really, really low-hanging fruit. So this idea of, let's say I'm feeling a bit tight somewhere. I've consistently got this problem with my shoulder that it just, feels it's not in the socket. It's always being pulled forward somehow. One of the most low-hanging fruits we can look at is the quality of the tissue. And that including, of course, the fascia around the area and everything like this. And in the absence of having a good, a massage therapist on tap waiting there in your cupboard, like, hey, can you quickly release this? It's something that Kelly Starrett said a long time ago, is that everyone should have the most basic tools for self-care, he's paraphrasing, but the most basic tools for self-care to look after themselves, especially if you're an active individual, if you move a lot, but also on the flip side of the coin, if you don't move a lot. I always present this idea, this dichotomy between moving and being moved. So I'm moving, or I can also be moved. This doesn't always work on like a 1 and a 0 scale, like I'm either one or the other. But just as an example, if you don't move that much because of your lifestyle circumstances or things like this, then at some point you may have to get someone or something to move you into certain positions, like an osteopath or quite a vigorous sports or just massage therapist would do for you. You may have to have that. But in the absence of that, using the roller and the ball is something that's very, 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 can be extremely effective in assisting superficial tensions in the body, which can lead to and exacerbate further symptoms with regards to articulation, how the shoulder is articulating, and other places in the body. But one of the things that is quite obvious is that there's not a lot of, I would say, popular education with these tools. And it's not to say that the methods that I present, which are very, very simple and they follow the same ideas throughout each one of the contexts, it's not to say these are the be-all and end-all of the use of these tools. I present them as saying, use in this way, they do then do the job that we propose that they do, which is helping just momentarily. It's not a long-term fix, but to help where possible release tensions, or we can call them knots, or however you want to see them in the body, that might be inhibiting movement ranges, movement potential. Because traditionally, the way that you commonly see it used, people kind of just rolling up and down on it somewhat indiscriminately. It can feel nice, but it doesn't do the thing, helping release muscles and tissues in the body, that they propose to be using it for. And it's quite simply because there's not information that's popularly available unless you're kind of searching for specific things. So for me, when I started using these a little bit more with myself and with many of my students, the results were immediate. And what I mean by immediate is in that things were there that needed to be released, and these tools, done with a certain method, were able to do that. Now, with regards to long term, it's not a long term fix. But for example, if you know that you are quite tight in the anterior region here, in your anterior shoulders, in the chest, up through the lats and things like this, let's say before you start your spine and scapula, your spinal pumping and your craneosacral exploration in spine and scap, if you do have that 5, 10, or even up to 20 minutes to do that rolling first of all, then work with your spinal pumping and notice any differences. Notice any differences. And I guarantee you, if there were existing tensions and lesions and things in there, you will notice the differences. And I find that it will just open you up more as a preparatory thing for the practice that comes after. So again, especially, for example, shoulder impingement, like superficial shoulder impingement. And what I mean by superficial when I use this word, I mean that it's not necessarily something that's structurally quite rigid in this system here that's causing issues. It's superficial things like tension. It might just be because you got a bad night's sleep for the past week. But something like lateral rolling for the deltoids, if you are experiencing shoulder impingements, I strongly encourage you, and with all of these, take these protocols, try them at least 3, or even 4 to 6 times a week for a couple of weeks, if not more, working them daily and then things afterwards. But as an example, SMR for lateral deltoid, really working with that, and then working hanging, and then working things like teacups, like we've seen from the previous programs. This is done daily, can really, really within a week, even a few days, release any symptoms of, for example, shoulder impingement. Because what is happening in there, something that is quite obvious when we have an impingement, there's not enough space in this capsule. There's just not enough space in the capsule. For one reason or another, the space in there has decreased, and it's impinging on the connective tissues, and eventually it causes inflammation and discomfort in certain ranges of motion, most commonly shoulder extension as well, internal rotation, things like this. So one of the main things, again, this low-hanging fruit. Okay, we can hang all day, bro. this is great. This will really contribute. But if the superficial tissue, the muscle tissue, is hypertonic, if it's tight, it's contributing to that compression here. And the fact is, when I'm working overhead and hanging, it's not stretching my lateral deltoids at all. It's much more conducive to stretching, you know, the origins here from the lat and also the tricep. But when we work over the lateral deltoid as well, again, people who I've worked with that have had a long history of intermittent shoulder impingement, and myself as well, in these circumstances, it can have really immediate improvements with that. So do invest in those particular scenarios and those tools. If you look at those descriptions, like helps mitigate, relieve inflammatory shoulder impingement or tendonitis of the forearms, if you look at one of those and go, actually, I've had that kind of on and off happening, just try the SMR scenario. And the biggest teller to if this is for you right now is you get on that roller, you try and relax into it, and it hurts. It's like, approach sensitively, because this nervous system response we kind of want to subdue so we can relax and release some of the tension in there. But that's the best way to do it. Get on the roller, and also by the time you feel yourself improving, the symptoms improving, normally that protocol, you will not have the same like nociception response, the pain. You will not have that same pain, and it will correlate with the improvement of your shoulder or your forearm or whatever it is, with the experience of that particular scenario. So do just encourage you to dig into those. Any questions about SMR? Just a brief whiz over there. No? Good. I'll just say one last thing on it. I was actually originally introduced to self-myofascial release in 2008 when I did my first personal training qualification when I was in the fitness industry. And I did it with a company called NASM, the National Academy of Sports Medicine. It's an American company combined with an English one. But anyway, they were all about SMR at this time. You know, it was like self-myofascial release. They even said you can tell a NASM personal trainer it's a person carrying a foam roller underneath their arm. And even then, the methodology that we were using and being taught, you know, after some time, I mean, I saw some value in the tools then, but then I was trying it myself and I was like, it's not really doing much for me. And then revisiting these tools after like almost 15 years, and with some different approaches and methodology, and then realizing, no, actually this does have a place. It just depends on how the particular tool is used. That's also something that gave these a bit of a value again in my eyes. There is a lot of I say a lot, but I've personally found in areas of the movement culture, because with regards to building mobility and developing flexibility, there are you know many tools, very, very effective and potent tools that we can use. SMR is not one of them, but in all honesty, I personally don't propose it as such, and I haven't actually really seen in the literature that it's been proposed as that either. So I think there's a bit of a crossing of wires there. I don't think really anyone has said do SMR, it will make you more mobile. If they have, it's a complete myth. It's soft tissue care, taking care of your stuff. Brush your teeth, brush your hair. I was gonna say wash your hair, brush your teeth, wash your hair. Do your SMR. That's it. Okay, cool. Any questions? No? SMR? Good. Let's bang on. Movement projects. These are things that you either really get stuck into or you just don't do them all. Both are fine. However, the reason I continue to add these movement projects into this mini series, the daily practice, is because I will speak of my own personal experience. Contexts such as these small tasks, are the things that helped expand me away from the idea of working or practicing or workout or whatever you want to call it physically with your body is not just about continually trying to build certain capacities. And this is kind of obvious, but it's also not obvious, because I've said this before as well in many places. Physical practice has historical origins. We look at the world of physical practice, back in the 1900s, the late 1800s, or we can go back even further than that and go back to the old school, the Athenian wrestling and things, and the physical practice had another meaning in this time as well. But what we now have still, though it is changing as well, I say changing, it's becoming more localized to what is known now as the fitness industry, is that I practice to kind of get stronger or get more flexible, or in some areas change body composition and things like this. But when you're introduced to a movement project, whether that's a movement riddle, where there's a problem you've got to solve, or whether it's playing with a ball or playing with a stick, movement as an idea and as a practice, for me anyway, immediately expanded. It was like, wow, I can do this. I can just kind of hang out in the park and play with this stick, or I can just play with this ball on my head. And this is quote unquote valid practice. Because this is always the thing, right? We all have limited time and we want to get the most bang for our buck. What can I, what's the one exercise that I can do? And then, it's going to make my time, my 10 minutes I have worth it. Well, for example, if you don't play much, because play is innate in these movement projects, because it is underpinned by a playful approach. How can you play for a ball with 20 minutes or a ball for 20 minutes if you don't have just a playful approach, right? So this is why these movement projects can be so valuable in expanding one's perspective on what movement is and how we can move. And that, for example, balancing a stick on your fingers, on your hands, and being interested in this and spending your time doing that, it is worthwhile. One of the things that can be difficult to, one of the ways it can feel difficult to see that is essentially because it's like, where am I supposed to feel it? I can't feel my muscle pain the next day. Like, how do I know that my proprioception or my fine or gross motor control is getting better? This then requires you to essentially just practice. That's it. Just absorb yourself in the scenario. Let yourself be absorbed in something that actually, I say, right down here, improve your motor control, gross fine motor control. I don't know that. I know that in this particular context, if you're working with these tools and you continue to work with them, certain things will improve. And those things are most definitely transferable to other places. But again, that's then an expansion of that practice. But within this, the specifics of balancing a stick on your hand and working with single leg tasks with a tennis ball, will it improve those things? I cannot give you a guaranteed answer for that. But what I can tell you is that working with those contexts will open a space. The context itself is that space. It will open a space for you to explore, just to start to explore things a little bit more. And that's, for me, one thing that really helped, many years ago, open me up to more things. Like, okay, it's worth my time just sitting on a wall and rolling around in the wall. It's worth my time, playing in the woods. It's worth my time hanging from a tree. This is not just, oh yeah, that's a novelty thing. That's nice. You just do that. I'll do that once in my life and never again. It's like, no, you can really invest in these things. So do dig into those. The stick balancing resource is, I think, quite comprehensive. There's certain benchmarks for practice there that you can work with, but really they're kind of arbitrary. I just put them there just so it's not, I'm just balancing a stick on my finger. But ultimately, if you can just play balancing a stick on your hands for 20 minutes, this is also something very, very nice. And single leg tasks with a tennis ball, these are a little bit more capacity dependent with regards to, for example, mobility. And of course, if you can't do a single leg pistol squat, you will have challenges more so with the context in which you go through that range. However, I've worked with people that do not have a pistol squat and have issues with their knee, but have somehow manage to get themselves up and down on one leg, touch the back of the head to the floor, and come back up again. How did they do it? They worked it out according to their own structure. So that means, for example, if I've got a ball balancing it on my foot, I use this one, but this is a cheating one. It's a rubber one. It's easier. So I'm balancing this ball on my foot. So from here, okay, I want to get to the floor. I can't do a one-legged pistol squat, but what I can do, I can bring myself kind of just low enough. I can put my hand on the floor, even my hand on my structure. I can shift things around. All those walkies. I can shift things around. I can use the hands. I can slide the foot against the floor, however it works. You can explore those contexts. They're still available there for you to work with. Another thing is that, and again, this kind of starts to actually look at contributions to capacities, is when you're working with single leg tasks with a tennis ball, you're innately spending a lot of time unilaterally in just that top range, just that kind of top range of knee flexion and extension here. As you keep trying to work down, keep trying to work down. And if you're playing with that context for like, 5, 10, 20 minutes, that's a lot of, reps for that top range, which can considerably contribute towards development of knee stability. The other thing that is, I say less tangible, because we can think of, hard attributes like stability, strength, things like this, mobility, which is a bit more a softer quality, is structural awareness. And this is a huge one as well, something that both of these contexts will teach you a lot about. How do I organize my structure in such a way to facilitate the completion or the ongoing development of this particular task? And structural awareness is something that as well we cannot develop enough. And it will be different in many different situations. And we'll see it in some of the other movement contexts here. But for example, from the previous phases, something like high bridge rotation is something that's very, very structurally dependent. It's not just, for example, the fact of, do I have the mobility to reach back here? It's like, no, maybe I just need to bring my feet a little bit further away and I give myself movement space. Or for an example, with the Low-gait sequence that we've seen before, like, oh, this feels very difficult. Okay, well, just give yourself a little bit more space. Okay, now I have this Low-gait poo-poo form or drop stance. So structural awareness when working on one leg is something that is, again, invaluable. And I've been focusing this a lot more with inspiration from other movement teachers over the past maybe 6 months, more than that now, a year and a half. Single leg balancing contacts with noise injected in there. So noise would be like you're moving, or there's something you're controlling, like a ball. This is an added noise into a single leg context that develops your experience on that one leg. And for anyone, I was going to say general population, but I'd say anyone, like balancing on one leg, having experience with that is something that we don't get enough enrichment in our day-to-day movement, and very often in our day-to-day physical practices as well. You might see someone put someone on one of these wobbly cushions or soft cushions and make them stand there and balance on one leg. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But okay, you did that for like 1.5 minutes on each leg, but once in a week. Really? Is this really going to help? What is the function of the foot and the knee? How do we traditionally walk? I say traditionally, in the olden times before the Romans threw down all the roads and everything. Good thing. But stability. The foot was always moving underneath us. The knee was always, of course, above the foot there, registering and correcting and recorrecting itself in order to maintain whatever that particular gait was, walking gait, running, jogging, whatever. So a range of different contexts in which you're working on one leg is really, really invaluable. And if we think about, for example, when we get to older populations, if you have friends or family, or you work with people that are more elder population, we'd speak about things like, okay, we need to develop the strength, the bone density. Let's do some back squats and things like this. Let's do some weight training. Resistance training helps improve bone density or help mitigate, if not reverse, some of the symptoms of arthritis, etc. Yeah, these are all very, very barbaric things. But when someone falls in the shower and breaks their hip, is it because they broke their hip because the bone density wasn't very strong and a normal, healthy young person can take that fall and they wouldn't have broken their hip? Or was it because they fell in the first place? Because I'm telling you, man, like, I slip a lot. And I slip and have slipped many times in the shower, but I've never fallen. I've never fallen. I've slipped countless number of times, but I've never fallen. So yeah, of course, take care of these things, bone density, etc., etc. Use protocols and certain practice regimens that can contribute to that. But also simple things like standing on one leg, balancing on one leg, balancing a ball on the foot, wiggling around a little bit, certain contexts for this, adding noise into that single-legged scenario. It can't be, it's really, really invaluable for everyone. That's enough on one leg stuff, sorry. So that's the movement projects that we've covered there. So one thing I would like to touch on now is spinal pumping and craneosacral exploration. Morning practice and your movement snacks here, it should be self-explanatory. This program is supposed to be taken into your life and your practice as it suits you, so you can break these things up if you need to. However, this spine and scat routine, that first routine, like I look at that on a piece of paper and I'm like, yeah, I'd like to do that tomorrow morning. It's a nice scat routine, and it's not good to, we say, blow your own trumpet, but I just look at it and I think if you can just do all of that in one sequence, this is, I mean, the optional breathing, if we were to take the breathing out of that, and just the spinal work there, that's literally going to take you about 10 minutes. And that's a great 10 minutes, I would say, to spend your day. The spinal-pumping craniosacral exploration is something that was originally inspired by some very, very basic breathing forms from Mantak Chia. Old Taoist guy is really, really nice to listen to. Yeah, very positive guy. And but in any case, he, for me, presented this idea of spinal work because I've been working with the spine and things for a long time before that, but the idea of the spine as an energy pump, the spine as an energy pump. And then he used the visualization of, look, we sit on our pump all day. However we sit, we're sitting, no matter how good your posture is, yeah? Good posture is. How appropriate your posture is for the given scenario. Maybe that's better. Okay, so I don't get the posture police knocking on my door. So you're sitting on your pump all day, if that's the living habits that you just have. You're sitting on that pump all day, and it gets blocked. Yeah, we all know this old school pump that you pump up and down by the hand, and the water goes and comes out of the front. So from Mantak Chia's perspective, of course, he refers to this as your chi, your life force energy that is being blocked in your spine. We don't even have to take on the perspective of chi energy in order to see the value in this analogy. Because we can speak about lymph and we can speak about blood flow, we can speak about many different things with the spine. We can speak about it on the physiological level of the tissues, the very real calcification of the tendons that run through the spine and things as well, that literally do calcify if you're not using it. So this idea of thinking of the spine as a pump, for me, it was a really, really beautiful idea. And then as I started incorporating it into my practice, there were some other things that complemented it well, I personally found, such as the craniosacral exploration. And the other thing that we're doing here with the spinal pumping is we're appreciating the spine as a whole. as one piece. In previous phases, we've looked at the spine in segments, or tried to segmentalize the spine as best we could, which of course, in actual, let's say, reality, you can't isolate parts of your spine. It doesn't work. But you can create patterns in these particular areas. So we work with, for example, rolling of the spine in different places, forward and backward rolls. We looked at around, for example, thoracic region and sagittal region and things like this. However, appreciating the spine as a whole that is always moving together. It's like a snake in terms of not like, oh, we got a snake spine. No, but I mean in terms of you move one bit, something shifted down here. It's all connected together. So for me, this then we work with the spine as a whole, very, very pragmatically in the sagittal plane here, going through it, and then working with the craneosacral exploration, linking those two ends and feeling as if I'm moving an actual bar, like a bar that is maybe perhaps made of this kind of tight rubber, but definitely malleable, moving it in these particular different ways, again with these different scenarios. So for example, scenario one is just I'm just here and noticing, yeah, it's connected. And then as we work through the second stage of pumping, then it's a little more moving, exploring ranges, different directions, things like this. And then finally, in the third stage of the exploration, it's then feeling that you're really using these hands to move the spine. So we're moving this animal, these different places, and then noticing that, wait a minute, my spine works as a whole, but I can also manipulate it as a whole as well. This is something also, this idea that interestingly enough, in a couple of different workshops, we've worked with partners. So you would actually work a craniosacral exploration with a partner. You would lead up to this scenario with different types of mobilizations and contact. So it's not just straight away like, okay, let's do this. And because it's a bit of a difficult context to work with. But one hand on the sacrum of your partner, one hand on the cranium here, and then just working them with small manipulation as they follow. A very, very sensitive context with this leading and following perspective injected into it. One thing I'll just add to the spinal pumping is that when we're working these levels, we are really affecting specific parts of the spine a little bit more than others. So for example, in the first one, when we're coming very, very low, right, bringing the elbows as low as we can. And it's really important you keep those elbows together, because as they start to split apart, you're going to be getting less of that stretch across the back that's affecting the whole of the, I say the posterior chain, but I mean the posterior chain, like your whole back, including the skin and the fascia and the musculature and everything. Putting those elbows in nice and low, you'll notice it pulling up further, lowering down the back. Also important, keep that chin tucked as you pull down, because we really want to try and feel it all the way to the top of the skull here. And if you are quite tight here, especially in the mornings, you will feel it all the way up to the back of the skull if you're pulling the chin right down. Likewise, as we come high with the elbows, you'll feel it stretching more across the upper back. And then when we come towards the middle again, the idea is that it's more of an evenly rounded stretch across the whole back. Everyone's experience with that will be different. These are just kind of ways that we can localize those stretches more. And the last thing I'll just add is that, of course, when we open, really think about trying to pull the elbows together behind you. I kind of think this is quite a simple cue, but very often when I work people with this, it seems to sometimes not translate. It's not just an external rotation of the arms here. It's not pulling down with the elbows. It's as if I'm trying to touch behind me the elbows here. I feel it open my entire chest. I feel my back compressing all in the middle, as if I'm trying to pull it all together, and I can't bring them any closer. Ideally, it would stop at that point in pretty much your shoulder blades are just pulling together. With that scapula pulled together, it's also encouraging more thoracic extension, which is something that normally we don't get a lot of. So again, it's just a case of revisiting those resources when you feel you need to and checking some of the details. And in all honesty, unless you really feel like I've got this context down and I'm very happy with how it is, always worth revisiting the resources after some weeks of practice, and then perhaps one more time after 6 weeks and just checking like, yeah, no, yeah, I've got that. That's great. So do check those contexts kind of regularly. Proofing of the spine. We've gone through that. That's an option you have instead there. Standing hinge and fold. Now, standing hinge and fold is something that was introduced to me by a teacher in a sequence. I think it was in a Qigong sequence it was included. But in any case, there were two things for me that were very interesting about this context, and I found it very useful for myself and for others. The main one is in the name. Hinge. Hinge, baby. Hinge is, if we were going to break it up and go back to like kind of pull, check, fundamental movement patterns, yeah, you got like push, pull, you got like carry, you got squat, lunge, rotate, twist, and you've got hinge. Hinge. Why am I shouting hinge? Because in many cases, unless someone has experience with this idea from, for example, weightlifting, things like working with a deadlift or Romanian deadlift, or for example, certain yoga poses would definitely need to have this understanding of a hinge in contrast with a rounded back. But I still see this when I give this to people who don't have that experience background, is that when they hinge, they keep hinging, they keep hinging, you keep hinging, and it's no longer a hinge. It's a rounding in the spine. Now, this might seem something that's so, completely obvious if you have this experience. However, when it's not obvious where that place is, we need to mark it. So we need to mark that movement position, that fundamental hinge. And that hinge position, the angle that you're at, is completely dependent upon your structure and your capacities. So it will always be different. Because we're working in the hinge with locked knees at the beginning, it is heavily dependent upon your posterior chain mobility. So your hamstring mobility, if there's tightness in the glutes, hips, and things like this, it will affect how low you can come. But that's precisely the idea, that we learn exactly where that place is. So for example, when I'm hinging in this position here, I'm shifting the backside back. Let's say, okay, that's where the hinge finishes. I know where that is. I know where my hinge position is. I can then translate this into a deadlift or a Romanian deadlift. I can translate this into a jump, ensuring that I keep a neutral spine so the force is generated and transmitted through a tight spine, as opposed to, for example, jumping like this. So the hinge position is fundamental. And having a context such as this in what can be a daily practice, a daily routine for the spine, is really just nicely marking that place. Now, if you're not sure if you've got your hinge and you know exactly where your hinge is, simply record yourself. Simply record yourself, and it will help you, just give you the information. If you're quote unquote living in fantasy rangeland, which for me, fantasy rangeland is like, oh, hey, my posterior chain here, my hamstring ability is got it, it's locked down, perfect. It's like, well, no, your hamstring was to here, and now all of this is spine. This is all spine. I think I'm coming close to the floor, but it's all spine. So hinge in that context is very, very valuable. The second valuable thing here is the folding action in the bottom position. It's a very, very fundamental balance position. But if you do wobble around there a little bit, it's going to give you some structural awareness over quite simply what I call the perch position, being perched, like a little bird, perched. Feet are together, of course, in this context. So I'm just showing the bottom position of the fold. So this would be like I would say like a half perch. The reason it's a half perch is because I'm more sitting back on my heels here. But I still have to have an awareness of where my center of mass is over this base so I can balance. But a full perch would then be that I shift these knees forward, and now I'm sitting nicely, quite comfortably over the balls of my feet. And again, there's structural awareness here, knowing that my main three centers of mass, so the head, the torso, and the pelvis, are directly over the base of support. And this is what we refer to as well when we speak about structural awareness. It's injected into the proofing practice, as I spoke about with shifting of weight, knowing how your structure should be in a certain context. And it's here as well in this hinge and fold. If you really can get this shifted forward position, then you can stick just with coming back. But physiological benefits you're going to get as well if you can shift yourself into this position here. Toe extension is loving you. Yeah, big toe extension. Spoke about it in the past. Get that big toe extension going on. That's going to help you in all types of positions. We had knee kissing before, these different positions. I think we may have even had toe rocking in previous phases. But all of this is developing not just the mobility in your feet and your toes, but also the intrinsic strength of the foot and the ankle. The intrinsic strength of the foot and the ankle, which basically means your ability to, it's on that spectrum again, move yourself as opposed to being moved. So if I had to hold on to something here, I'm kind of being moved because I'm holding myself structurally against the support. So that's one thing. Never use external support for this. Do it internally. Make those adjustments. Your body will learn and register them. Anything that needs to develop physiologically, like certain ranges of things, they will develop over time. But then you will also develop this intrinsic strength, the ability to move in and out of those positions too, with the feet and the toes actually working and doing that stabilization work themselves. Last thing I'll add to standing hinge and fold is the breathing instruction is given in the resource. Please use it with the breathing instruction. It is essentially a breathing form. And this is something very, very nice in the morning, especially if you're not particularly doing the breathing mobilization or the lung cleaning. This is something in the morning that it just takes you through a few breaths. It's essentially 8 to 10 in and out breaths at a very nice steady tempo, breathing with movement. This is very nice to kind of set your autonomic nervous system for the morning to where you need to be before a day's stress comes and gets you, or before you dose the coffee down and get the cortisol back up again. Bring it down and bring it up. It's fine as long as it's waving and moving. Okay, so just to recap with that, that's like a steady breath in and a steady breath out. One thing you can actually add, and I do this sometimes, is a 0-point breath hold. A 0-point breath hold in the bottom position. It's not supposed to be extensive. It's just to open up a space in what one other teacher called the twilight zone. That time between the in and the out breath, or that time when you've breathed out, the no breathing pause, he referred to this as the twilight zone. It's kind of just an empty space in which you're very, very, very focused, whether you're trying to be or not. It's just kind of what happens in that space. So just as an example, I would breathe in, half hinge, breathe in. Transition, breathe out. From here, I can pause, no breathing. Then breathe in. Moment of no breathing at the top again. And you can start, for example, you could really use this as a breathing frame. You could start with 3 seconds of no breathing, increase it to 5 seconds of no breathing, and depending how much time you have, you could even just do, for example, 4 or 5 reps, and go from 5 seconds top and bottom no breathing, next rep 10 seconds top and bottom no breathing, third rep 15 seconds top bottom no breathing, last one 20 seconds bottom no breathing, 20 seconds top no breathing at your 0-point hold. If you're not sure about the 0-point hold and where it is and things and stuff like that, it is outlined in the the progressive lung cleaning. And also, if you type in on the open resources playlist, or just on however you, I don't know what it's like from a user point of view, but just find the video that says breath holding or 0-point breath holding. It should be there, but I believe it's also touched in the progressive lung cleaning as well. One variation you can add to that as well, the standing hinge and fold, is I say a pray, a perch. We have a perch and a pray, a perch and pray. So as I come down now from here, I breathe in, hinge, no spinal rounding. I drop myself down. From here, I'm now going to open the knees out. I come to the side of the feet. I let myself down as low as possible here. I bring it back in. I shift back onto the toes. Breathe in, breathe out. Let me check the breathing pattern here would be in, out, in. I shift back onto the feet so I can roll to the outside of the feet. I shift back, breathe in, and then breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. So what we've got there, we've essentially injected, we came down, we shifted back, we pulled the knees apart, and we come onto the outside blades of the foot as we use our weight to pull ourselves down on the head. To make that context productive, you kind of do need like a minimum baseline of mobility to be able to use that. But do check it out, see if it gives you something valuable, particularly around the hips area. If you then feel a bit precarious in the ankles, for example, with that, because you're entering this ankle rolling position, it's something that can expose you to that in a gentle way as well. Yeah, that's all I want to say for the standing hinge and fold. It's just something when I get introduced to a very specific context, whether I'm in a class or I'm visiting a workshop, and it's like one movement, and then like, wow, I love this context. Very, very simple, but so many things. This was one of them now. So it's been in my practice now for at least a couple of years. And then when there's something like that, very simple, those are the things that I'm like, it's very, very, very simple to share. So it found its way into this practice. Moving on from there, standing or seated pulsing, that's self-explanatory. One thing I want to note is I gave the option there for breathing to deepest position or working with pulses. And this is because you really should take it with your awareness of how you're feeling in this position. Because as an example, some people are just so super tight in forward folding, it's like unreal. Like, I mean, and I'm not, doesn't matter what age you are, your physical background, the amount of people, like my nephew, he has a long history of swimming and athletic sports and things like this. Man, he's, I don't remember now, he's 12, 13 years old. No joke, he cannot touch his toes. It's so bad, he can't touch his toes. I took him to a trampoline place here when he came and visited us in Switzerland. We went to a trampoline center with his sister, because his sister's a gymnast, so she's very, very bendy. And after about 20 minutes on the trampoline, the poor kid had really bad back pain because his posterior chain was so tight, and then he was getting this shocking, this bouncing, bam, 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 bam. And I had to massage him for like 20 minutes so he could continue playing on the trampolines. It's really, really sad. It's just because of his physical practices that he's invested in a lot. He's very active, but they have side effects. And normally at this age, you're not like, okay, I better mitigate my practice of swimming with some front folding. He doesn't think like that, and that's obvious. But if, for example, I were to just give him, hey, use this context, it's pike pulsing, and you're going to work 100 pulses in the morning. 2 to 4 times a week. Do 100 pulses of pike pulsing. His back is probably not going to feel very good after that, and it's probably not going to give him more range. In fact, it will probably just shock his nervous system that suddenly he has this really tight place, and now someone's tugging on it and pulling, bum, 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 bum. Now, over time, we do want to have elasticity in these main articulations. And this hip articulation, front folding, and major articulation, we want this to be elastic as well. But we can't always necessarily start from that place. So let's say, for example, you do start with 50 kind of times pulsing, and it feels basically like a lot, because it can even make you physically tired if your body isn't used to that movement pattern. Just spend 6 weeks, 8 weeks just with the breathing, just 30, 60 seconds, bringing yourself down here, keeping those knees locked. This is really important. Keep the knees locked, because this has to be the baseline standard for the scenario. Even if it's here, you can use the head, use the arms as a weight, and just breathe into it. Long out breath. Breathing yourself down. Less intrusive is the sitting variation, but I will also say that the sitting variation has its place, and it's not a regression, it's a variation, because there are things that will be revealed to you more in the sitting variation that are not present in the standing variation, simply because of the way that gravity is working and the way that you're blocked against the floor. So take them as two different contexts, not as progressive or regressive. The other thing as well, of course, when you're working with this basic front folding, is that you can work with the breathing and you can work with the toes as well. So you can then work with dorsiflexion as well. And even in this position, doing something as simple as we had with the craneosacral exploration with the spinal pumping, something as simple as tucking your chin from here and then just going, this feels like, oh, I feel this, tuck the chin, this here, and then it will transmit to the full range of the posterior chain. From the back of, it's not even from the Achilles, it's from the big toe. It's from the big toe, it goes underneath your foot, it comes up here through the Achilles, woo, that range goes all the way up from there, up to the base of your skull. So those two contexts are equally valuable. Just kind of check which one you need. You can even do both of them. That's absolutely fine in that session. But start just with the breathing context. When you feel everything's okay, start with 50 pulses. I would even just advise, 10, 20 seconds of breathing into it first, then starting with pulsing. And then over time, starting with 50, do that for maybe a month. Next month, do 75. Next month, build it up to 100 until you can keep 100 as like an easy standard. Again, this will depend with everyone. One thing I also know with pulsing, and you can see in the resources, is the texture of pulsing. The texture of pulsing, probably written in the resource, but it should be elastic. How do I know if something's elastic or not? Well, basically, it bounces back. If it's elastic, it bounces back again. So, for example, if I've started working pulsing and I find myself doing this, this is not pulsing. This has some value, but this is more kind of just pulling, and I'm coming up. You can use this, but what we're looking to develop towards is boing, 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 boing. You should have that elastic texture. It's the same for we've seen pulsing in other places in the daily practice series with pancake, with dorsiflexion work for the ankle. Pulsing is the texture we're looking for, and because essentially this is what we want to have inbuilt into our body. Elasticity. I want someone to press on my head and I go boing, 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 boing. I have a friend that he has an amazing laugh, so amazing that he can't do it in public. And we were in a taxi and we were saying some stuff to him and he couldn't stop. And when he holds in his laugh, he turns elastic, and it's amazing. He sits there and he doesn't make any sound. He just goes, and you look from the back. And for me, I just think that's elasticity. That's the pulsing texture we're looking for. So be the guy that you put a coin in and you start laughing internally, expressing that elasticity. That's what we want from that particular context. Going on from there, the prone hang and lumbar extensions. This is a very potentially Exposing context. Now, it's quite obvious what we've done here. We've worked with front folding, spinal flexion, and now we're working with spinal extension. And one of the spinal flexion forms was, well, this wasn't really a spinal form. The hinge was from the hip. That's a hip hinge. You're hinging from the hip. Standing, pike pulsing necessarily because you have your legs in the way. Of course, your legs are blocking you, so you will be expressing rounding of the spine as you would with a Jefferson curl or something like this. With a pancake, we do not have the legs in the way, therefore we can express more of a neutral spine. But we're expressing rounding of the spine with a piking context. So of course, when we switch over, the idea is that we're just giving enough attention to spinal extension as well. But this can be a very revealing scenario, a very sensitive scenario, just as much as hanging, beginning a regular hanging protocol for the first time can also be quite a revealing scenario, by which I mean you start to open that Pandora's box a little bit. Yeah. So you start to like, get in this position and you're like, oh, this feels tight. This feels tight. Well, this feels tight. And you get a bit comfortable over time. Yeah. And you start breathing into it. And then you release something and you're like, ah, the fuck was that? And you find something. And this is very, very real that can happen. It's happened to me. It's happened to others. That there was something in our house. There was a locked door. There are some doors in our houses that, unless we really spend a project with that probably should be kept locked. There's some places that I just specifically won't go that, in a daily worldly movement scenario, like walking through the street, you would never go there anyway. But there's places in my body that I'm like, I'm not opening that door yet. I can keep it closed. I just keep a bit of tension there. I'm not going to breathe and go into that too deeply. Sometimes you can work with it sensitively and it will release something, and you'll find that one thing, it just kind of does what the good chiropractor might be able to do with a certain manipulation. However, I do propose prone hang with a word of caution, because you're essentially hanging on your lumbar spine, hence it's a prone hang. It's very, very supported in its variations and its progressive variations, for example, working on the knees, etc., etc., etc. And normally your nervous system will be holding a certain minimal amount of tension, so you cannot go to those places that it's not familiar with. However, at the same time, as I said, when you get comfortable, you may release something. And when you release something, you're not quite sure what the result of that release might be. I've also mentioned this before elsewhere, that if we look at statistic things, you can find that statistics in certain studies that herniations, for example, in the spine, or bulges in the discs, very, very common, very, very common, up towards 80-90%, to the point that, it's not worth going to a doctor just to get your spine scanned with an MRI if you've got nothing specifically wrong, because they will tell you what's wrong. Because there will be many things that are wrong, not anatomically correct. So you could find one of these places, an anterior herniation, a posterior herniation, even with the pulsing as well. So please do be mindful with those. It has to be an explorative scenario and gathering information again about your structure and structural awareness. Going to the other extreme, if you've got no problems with that, the different variations there can lead you also towards what is I call a head to toe context, but it's head to toe extension. So the toes are coming along the back here into extension towards the head. A completely, more or less, arbitrary form. It's a form. Some people spend a lot of time just to touch the toes to the head, when it might not have any practical application. The practical application I found for it was when working with dancers, they use this form in different specific ways for aesthetic purposes. Yeah, that's fine. But if for some reason you want to touch your toes to your head, you can use this very, very basic context here as something that would be daily contributing towards that. That's not what I'm into. If you're into that, then go for it. You can use prone hang, lumbar extension variations for that purpose. When we get into the next part of the morning practice, and we'll go through this, then we'll just take a quick 5-minute break. The hollow body hold. This is why it would be good after you've done those morning practices, if you have the time, to go through that short sequence there. The hollow body hold is then, we've been stretching and bending the spine here, but we want to have a mobile spine, but we need a stable spine as well. You can't, if you want to hear more about this, very popular, very famous, and I do agree with a lot of his things. It's difficult not to agree with a specialist in their field. If you do disagree, then you need to make sure you've done your homework. But this guy, in terms of his perspectives on spinal stability, and I think there's some of the tools he uses specifically in practical application for spinal stability. They're, bird dogs and things like this. Yeah, they're fine as well, but a hollow body hold. This is something that is, for example, it's used in the world of gymnastics to maintain a spinal position in a variety of forms, and it's a fundamental form. And in their world, it's not used, oh, we're using this for spinal stability, but it is, because you're stabilizing the spine in a particular form. And in this particular form, it's one which is, I say, not the antithesis, but it's mitigating one of the most common postural, exacerbated postural positions that can happen, which is like quite a severe anterior pelvic tilt. But without getting too biomechanical and saying it should be like this, this, and this, essentially, if you're constantly locked in anterior tilt, and of course, let's say if you work with weight training, you do deadlifting and things like this, you're contributing to more tension there. There can be a lot of problem with working in posterior tilt. And this can create spinal instability, because we've got a lot of strength, maybe not strength, we can speak of it as, being hypertonic. You're very hypertonic in musculature on one side, and the other side not so much. I once worked with a guy as well. He was a massive, heavy deadlifter, bodybuilder. And then we did some hanging knee raises. This is something very simple, some time ago. And he couldn't do hanging knee raises because it gave him back pain. But he could lift 220 kilograms off the floor, but he couldn't hang and lift his knees up. And this, at the time, I was working in the fitness industry. I can't understand this. And then thinking about it, of course, sometime afterwards, it's of course, because he didn't have this disbalance, his anterior intrinsic, again, inside his anterior strength to be able to neutralize his spine. Neutralize as in bring it towards a neutral position, not like neutralize him, but neutral position. He couldn't maintain that and lift his legs. He didn't have that motor control. It doesn't mean he didn't have the strength. I'm sure he had the strength to lift his own legs, but he didn't have the motor control, that pattern to be able to pull what I call ribs down, which is essentially closing the gap underneath the anterior side of the ribs and the anterior pelvis, as if there's two rubber bands here, and closing that gap into posterior tilt, which is a key cue for the handstand, for straight line handstand, even for tuck handstand, anything like this. A very key cue to maintaining your straight line is ribs down, and it should be shouted and written with an exclamation mark, as I always do. So hollow body, if you can throw some of these in until after some months, the full extended form is a piece of cake to you. It will contribute significantly to all aspects of your movement habits, whether that's walking or whether that's deadlifting. Again, it's the idea of a low-hanging fruit. If we improve something that's very, very fundamental, it's just a fundamental position, it can have a strong carryover to different places. I don't need to see exactly where it is and count the numbers on the plates. I know that it's something fundamental and it can have a transferable effect to other movement contexts. But one thing is, just as you'll see hollow bodies normally done in certain classes, CrossFit classes, I taught a long time in CrossFit places, it never, I'm going to say it, it's never right. It's wrong. I hate to say that, but it's just wrong. Because what you'll often see is that the back is on the floor and the shoulders come up here, and maybe this happens. The head goes forward because it makes a forget. So this is my hollow body. Yeah, it's like this is not being as effective as it could be. Again, it's the same with the SMR. It's not necessarily doing the thing that you're saying that it's doing. You're doing it, but it's not actually doing that thing. So start from the very, 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 very beginning. And the very, very, very beginning is working on that sacrum. We spoke about points of support before, and I proposed the most immediate four is base of support, base of support, base of support, base of support, or base of support. We're going to use the sacrum. Just a bit up from the sacrum towards the lumbar spine, but really we need to get these, not just the shoulders, but the scapula off the floor and almost the entire thoracic spine pulled up off the floor. So that's the gap there, okay? It's not here. It's not here. It's here. Don't go overboard and find yourself sitting up. This is something completely different as well. This is also a wrong position. We're gonna back here, and I can feel that above my sacrum towards the lumbar spine, there's kind of a flattening there that I can balance on. And already I'm finding this challenging, holding this and speaking. So that would be the first basic position. Start from the basic position every single time, and then extend yourself out afterwards. So for example, I would check in with just the basic position here, start here, lift, push into the ground, let the feet come up gently, I come here, and then maybe I feel, oh, that's feeling heavy today. I'm just going to stick here, okay? If it's feeling okay, then just shift my hand so you can see. Then I'm going to bring it wider. But if this happens, the back then comes down. This is a no-show. That's not doing what it's doing. It can actually be very, very counterproductive, because what it can do, see this all the time, I saw this all the time, is that when my back now, my upper back with this hollow body, if my upper back is supported, it allows me to start arching my lower back. And I've got a gap underneath here now. I can put my hand, you see my fingers? Yeah. This is the worst position. You're patterning the opposite of what you're trying to pattern. However, when you work at a lower progression, when you're not so extended, then you have to maintain that point, and you can really on a fine scale feel exactly where that starts to break down. So that's a short note, but a very, very important note on the hollow body. One thing I'll add to that is that, again, we have the variables here to break it up, 2 times 15 seconds or 1 30-second hold. You can use that progressively. But also, let's say 30-second hold, you can hold this position, 30 seconds. Piece of cake. Then, in your next phase, after you've done it for 6 weeks, try a wider position, but then work at the 2 times 15 seconds. So when we have variable changes, you should also see it not just as the progression. It's not like, oh, I was doing 2 times 15 before, that was easier, now I go to the hard one, 30 seconds. Not necessarily the case. When you go back, if you go back to 2 times 15 seconds, you can then say to yourself, actually, I can try a more progressive variation now. So do see that. Don't just see these variables. We've got a lot of them as one's easier, one's harder. It's not necessarily the case. It changes the context of the movement. It changes the rules of the scenario, changes those rules. Like maybe I can have 2 substitutes in a game of football, but now in this game you can have 5. Completely changes the game. So same here. You have different opportunities to explore different variations. We have the hollow body rocking in this resource too. Now, the full hollow body rock is a very, very challenging movement, not just in terms of holding the form, but understanding how the hell do you rock in this position? Because I'm not using my extremities. I don't use the feet and the hands to rock. I'm not using the hands to rock it. It happens again intrinsically. It happens intrinsically in my spine and other places through the whole bowl, so to speak. But what I would like to emphasize here is that I'm going to grab a mat quickly. This is my preferred mat at the moment, the sheepskin. And we can actually work this context without having to go to the full progression. By full progression, I mean fully extended. And this is valuable because it then means that you can start to explore this intrinsic, again, seems to be a key word for today, this intrinsic strength used inside to manipulate your movement. So you can actually just be on this progression here. This is fine. And you can work again with this rocking. And again, notice my feet are not moving. My hands are not moving. Nothing's moving. Something else is moving. And it's this contraction, cyclical contraction, coordinated in such a way that it expresses itself in the rocking of the body. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, that rocking thing, I can't explore that. That's a really high progression. No, try it in the tuck as well. And it's really a nice one. And you can either work that for time, like 2 times 15 seconds, or you can work for 10 repetitions each time. Active shoulder extension is self-explanatory. I will just say that with that, we've had previously the AG hold, which for all the people that kept asking AG, it stands for artistic gymnastics. Sorry, it's not something cooler than that. So the artistic gymnastics hold. Yeah, AG hold. We had that. That was active. Active shoulder extension as well, but it was closed kinetic chain. So this distinction between closed kinetic and open kinetic chain, to keep it really simple, and maybe some people would disagree with me here, but this is what I use it for and it helps, is that my body here, my body is moving in relation to my bases of support. So my bases of support, my extremities here, my hands, AG hold, where the hands are back to forward, doesn't matter. My body is moving. The distal limb that's supporting, like the legs or the feet, is fixed. But what we have now in active shoulder extension is that it's open kinetic chain. So the distal, or the stuff that's doing the moving or moving the weight, the body is staying fixed, and that is moving there. Those two in combination, if you have, for example, historical restrictions in shoulder extension, let's say, for example, whether your hands are facing back or forward, pronated or supinated, if you can only lift your arms like here or anywhere less than 45 degrees, then I think it would be very, very valuable for you to, in your practice, work with something like the closed kinetic chain one, and then afterwards plug it into the open kinetic chain as well for some focus on shoulder extension. But that was added in here just to put an extra tool in your tool bag for shoulder extension, something that we don't see a lot of in traditional types of practices. Although gymnastics is a traditional practice, it's not one that's so popularly practiced by many people. But you know, if we think about, for example, I see traditional body weight strength and things like this, you don't really see shoulder extension. You don't see people doing manas or even progression. You have to do a whole mana holding yourself up. But progressions towards this, the AG hold and things like this, for me, has given so much. The only thing we really see is bent arm extension, which is going to be your classic dip. So the arm is in shoulder extension here. We're working with bent arm work. You see that bent arm work, but not straight arm work in that position. And one thing is that, of course, when we're working bent arm in extension, it's not expressing full range in extension because you don't have your arm in extension. So there's no effect towards the forearms. There's no effect towards the ligaments and the tendons and the inside of the median and lateral tendons here. So something like active shoulder extension combined with those AG supports we've seen in other places is something very, very valuable. Arm coordinations. This is a fantastic project that you, in the beginning, it's one of those things again, like, what am I doing? Like, I can moving my arms here? Like, what's going on here? Am I really developing my coordination? That's the question, is it? Isn't it? Are you really developing your coordination? If you speak to people who work a lot with contexts that they propose are developing coordination, one of the things that you'll hear, or I've heard quite consistently, is that coordination should be developed in many different movement scenarios. Many different movement scenarios. However, we also, I feel, need to expand what we understand by the idea of coordination. Because, for example, the emptying sequence we have here as well, which is a quite comprehensive resource, the ability to shake, to turn yourself on and off so you can have this shaking jelly texture. This is also a coordination between your on and off switch, by which I'm referring to tension or not tension. That's why I like the German version better. It's like Spannung or entspannt. So with this context, the coordination context, we are working with synchronized arm patterns and two different patterns. This is a context that I came across when I was traveling some years ago in South America, and I visited a student who was working with Ido Portal. And I assume, because I've seen it since then, worked with others connected to this movement group, that it was perhaps part of their research. I personally was introduced to one arm pattern and I just extrapolated it myself. This is just the very beginning of certain arm patterns and things that I don't know if you've seen some videos of me working things arm pattern related or on some of the different social media outlets. It starts to begin working with spine. It starts to connecting with moving through space. It starts to enter a world of improvised movement as well. So I'm just letting you know that this context in and of itself, it's really fantastic for prehabilitation and just some nice circular waving movements for the shoulder and the scapula. It's also nice as a movement context with regards to, how can I get this coordination? But it can develop further if you, in your own practice, wish to extrapolate that. One thing I'll just say about it is that don't stop moving. Don't stop moving in this context. So when you're working this, you should think deliberately, okay, so I want to change to this lateral pattern. What is that lateral pattern? What is it? I'm thinking while I'm moving. I'm thinking while I'm moving. And then it comes to me and then okay, there it is. We're trying to work through the brain whilst moving at the same time. But ultimately, we want to just completely bypass the brain. And these arm patterns, whether it's synchronized like this or whether it becomes unsynchronized, which is exactly the same concept, or whether I use this and I start working with the spine at the same time whilst working with these unsynchronized patterns. This is where it can develop to. So there's just a lot of richness in there again. It does require the continued practice. In the beginning, it's like, what is this? I don't understand. I'm not going to do that. Invest in it, and you can follow the breadcrumbs to where they want to take you. Fisherman squat mixing. This is also nice to inject into squat proofing, I would say as well. For example, if you're working with squat proofing, we've already mentioned this. One of them is that I bring myself into the ground. From here, I can transition to fisherman squat. Now, fisherman squat is a very traditional squatting type position. And what's nice about fisherman squat is that it connects you nicely from the world of the floor to the world of middle ground and eventually to rising. So it's a very fundamental position for entering and exiting the floor at the same time. When you're working your fisherman squat exploration, observe the resource carefully and you'll notice there's some quite, I say, deliberate arm movements in there. However, we want them to feel natural. They're quite simply coordinated with the movement in such a way that they facilitate the counterbalancing of my weight backwards and forwards. Now, also, if you do suffer from restrictions and dorsiflexion. If we just have restrictions and dorsiflexion, just the kind of continuous pulsing of this movement is just going to contribute to some experience there as well. So with the fisherman squat, what we're looking for is ultimately seamless connection between these patterns on both sides, coordinated with some upper body movement as well, helping bring me in and out. And as I said, we can connect this with squat proofing as well. We put those two concepts together, squat proofing and fisherman squat mixing, once you've developed your vocabulary of that. And that is a very, very nice fundamental floor exploration in this lower body compressed position, developing the squat, helping with the hips. It can also contribute towards more experience for the knees to, again, helping through, again, superficial types of knee issues if something just feels a bit tweaky, or just diagnosing, for example, now at this closed angle, of knee flexion and loaded, it's not so good. This is all valuable information. The last thing I'll just say with the fisherman squat is that when you bring yourself up to the top position, it's a full, complete rise. I bring myself all the way up. If you want to be mechanical about it, I'm contracting the glute, so it brings me into an open hip position, so that we have a full distinction between this world being down, floor fisherman squat, foot-seated fisherman squat, and then completely up in this position, okay? Of course, if I was then going to move, I would need to place ball of foot so I can go somewhere, okay? And those options are all available with the fisherman squat. It's essentially patterning, again, building structural awareness, but we have that inbuilt development of experience in deep knee flexion, very deep, as deep as you can get in knee flexion. Protracted push-up was a new resource, so I believe everything is in there. I will just say that if you have dreams of performing a handstand push-up one day, this is where it starts. Being able to maintain a protracted position, which is then requiring you to have an understanding of external rotation in the bent arm position. Having that under load in a quasi-inverted position. One thing that's very important, and again, it's outlined in the resource, but I found this hugely beneficial in the past when I was practicing this and also developing it towards the handstand push-up, is the awareness of your center of mass. And now people will say around the belly button, but I like to say, just because whenever I look at things and people's submissions and my own footage, I would say actually practically look around the hips, or the pelvis, specifically the pelvis as a load. So when we're performing the protracted push-up, again, you'll need to find a structure, whether there's different instructions in there, whether it's feet wider, knees flex, or whatever it is, that allows you to try and bring your center of mass here, coming over my hands, basically there, okay? So this is the position that I'm looking for. You can see now from here, these three are in alignment. That is really, really what we're looking for. Now, in the case that this is super difficult, because it can get very heavy, yes, we can start to work further back here, or even work partials. Of course, we have the eccentric variations as well. Whenever you're working those, especially if it's just the eccentric or partials, again, because it's going to be difficult, especially during the press phase, keep the elbows in, keep that external rotation. As soon as you start to feel it open up as you push, like this way, you're just not patterning what we're really looking to pattern in this protracted push-up position, which if we develop it and we have that strong position combined with something like the fundamental understanding of your hollow body, it gives you pieces that could be put together in a full range strength form, such as the handstand push-up further down the line. Tabletop isometric, self-explanatory. Again, we're exploring now, instead of we had the bilateral AG hold previously in previous phases, we've now got the unilateral table. And this is a very, very nice context because it then starts to work with the idea of managing counter rotation in the body. So when we speak about counter rotation, we're referring to the position of the torso in relation to the position of the hips, connected through the midsection essentially. And then of course, when I'm in a 4-point support, so again, 4-point support is very, very stable. Yeah, there's no rotation that wants to happen here. So it's just a very, very stable supporting hold. I can use it as a nice stretch, and I can use it to develop experience in shoulder extension. We're always pushing through the ground, pulling the shoulders back, pushing back through the floor. Hands back is also fine as well. As soon as I remove one foot, of course, this hip wants to drop because it has no support. So I have to counter rotate. And now if you could see lines of tension across the body in like red lines, before it was 2 lines straight down, going through the arm to the leg. You remove one leg, suddenly one of those lines goes diagonally across the body. So you have to work with this uneven counter rotation to pull it back. And that's going to be very, 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 very valuable for developing stability throughout the midsection, namely in the spine as well, and developing the physiological awareness, the sensual awareness to say, okay, how can I support myself in this unevenly supported position? And then, of course, when we get to variations such as we have the single arm there as well, and when we get to variations such as the 1 leg, 1 arm, now we really have that diagonal line of tension, which is coming across the body here, in which I'm trying to counter rotate and hold that position, which comes to the final point on that table. You really have to be as strict as you can about keeping the hips high and keeping them in the horizontal plane. Because, for example, if I just take one arm away and I'm like this, which becomes something different, I've just readjusted my support now. And actually, I'm in quite a stable 3-point support. There's no line of tension whatsoever. But if I keep it here and keep those hips up, now I can feel myself working all across. So really keep those hips level in the horizontal plane. You will be subject to things such as your shoulder extension. This will develop with time. But to keep that shoulder stable and the scapula stable, always pushing through the floor as well, essentially just resisting gravity. Iron cross push-ups variation. Now, I included this because this is a movement I use so much, and actually it's in my morning practice at the moment. This is a position that is, I like this context, and I find it's, when you have the structural understanding, it's not a strength context in terms of it's dependent upon the force output that I can produce, like how many push-ups can I do. No, it really relies again on structural awareness, because when we're in this wide open position, I have to find, how do I position my scap and my shoulder? So, for example, with this context, do be mindful of that. If you find yourself working, so I'll just take not too wide a position here, just about double shoulder, so double shoulder width. I want to make sure when I come down, I'm not compensating any weird stuff, shoulders coming up or anything like this. It's also fine with this to work with partials in this context, because as I said, it's more a structural awareness development form, which basically means what position do I feel most stable in this form? How can I stabilize myself? You can even just hold here, but if you can just work with even just slight flexions coming up and down, staying nice and tight, I'm maintaining that hollow body form as well here. I can just work with small flexions. I can even come down and just hold isometrically, but I feel already that it's trying to pull my scap out of its quote unquote set position. Set being, I think of putting my scapula in the back pockets. Like I put my hands in my back pockets, I put the scapula, roll them back down, and put it in the pockets. So I'm trying to keep them in the pockets here, whilst maintaining a loaded form with the arms out straight. This also, because we go through, I say, quite an open angle of the arm, and essentially to straight arm, it's a very, very non-intrusive straight arm strength development form as well. By straight arm strength, I'm not really talking about being loaded in a straight arm position, like a type of planche or things like this. I'm actually just talking about the stimulus towards the tendons. So for example, if you do have existing elbow pain or things like this, especially at the most open angle, this scenario will tell you. So it might be a case that you'd have to put that on the shelf for a moment if you're experiencing that, but it will give you the information that in this loaded straight arm position, it's revealing some things. So you can use it as that type of diagnosis tool as well. Hole, the classic. I'm only going to say one thing about the hole because the resource is extensive. Keep your feet on the floor. For this context that I've given for the hole, this variation of the hole, keep your feet on the floor. Two things this will help with. It will firstly just help you with the pattern because your legs aren't flying up in the air everywhere. Once you're proficient with the pattern and you understand it in terms of the trajectory of movement, this transverse rotation, we're again rotating again in this particular play. So when I have this idea, that's absolutely fine. You can do what you want with the legs. You do the hole as you like. But to build a fundamental understanding, once again, we're working with weight shifting. So I want to have all my four bases of support in contact. So when I work here, I'm drawing this along the floor. And yeah, I have to find the part of my foot that slides. If you need it, again, if you need it, you just use socks. It's absolutely fine. From here, and now I have weight in my feet. I'm shifting the weight to this foot. The weight is now in this foot, and now I can draw the second. If I have the feet just kind of in the air, I'm not getting that kind of gradation of weight shifting between hands and feet. It's just a step and a step. It's not the same thing. Keep your feet on the floor with the hole. Record yourself because your feet will probably come off the floor. Okay. Deck squatting. Deck squat. People look at me. Deck squat. Are you doing deck squat? What are you? Steve Maxwell. Steve Maxwell did promote the deck squat in one of his videos, and I think I personally, in terms of just like, as I say, daily practice here, like you're just getting up and getting down. Again, if we talk about fundamental movement patterns, can you get up, bro? Can you get down, bro? In the initial instance, it's very nice because it reveals, I say, shit the bed moments, to use the words of Ido Portal, when it's like, oh yeah, gotta get up here, and you're like, what is this wizardry? Like, you know? So again, structural awareness. And this is very much what daily practice is about as well. It's context that teach you about how your body is now and at this time, and how practicing these contexts can help develop that. For those of you who are absolutely fine with a bilateral context, we have a unilateral context with various variations. And yeah, just dig into that, and you can use it as a diagnosis tool as well as a development of structural awareness, like how do I have to have my feet, what position, and my knees in order to make it through this hole here. In terms of actually developing those capacities, it will develop some certain things, but of course it's not on the level of something like a back squat in terms of lower body development strength, nor is it, for example, as potent as something like a sissy squat or a shrimp squats for developing experience in certain end ranges or unfamiliar ranges. However, in terms of a movement pattern, it's hugely valuable. Again, can you get up? Can you get down, bro? The open and closed hip escape, the open hip drop to close hip escape, I will just say that you should see these in close connection with the neck loading and foot shoulder anchors concept that is in F2 of emptying and softening. Notice the connection between those two things. It's explained quite well in neck loading and foot shoulder anchors, this concept of anchoring. So for example, when I'm working with this hip escape idea, when I'm shifting my center of mass, So again, it's a closed chain movement because I have my the most distal part here is fixed in space, and my body moves around it. The shoulders are anchors here as well, and I shift the body. So what actually happens here is that the shoulder and the feet do not move. They are anchored. And I have the possibility to move my body around these anchors. And this concept, it goes extremely far. I can work different things. I can work back roll here, anchor now, anchor right foot, anchor shoulder. I move around that anchor. I can go contralateral. Go this direction, foot, this is going to be an anchor, right foot anchor, left shoulder anchor. Now it's contralateral. And that's how I work it. And what happened? I brought myself through by entering the open hip position. Hence, we're practicing the open hip position in the open hip dropping. So they're very, very connected. And for example, movements such as the classic, I call the shoulder hollow, where I come over onto my shoulders and I step myself over. You can see it. If I come back, you can see it even better. I'm shifting the weight. I'm working on anchors pinned. Think of them as pinned down placements of the shoulder and the feet. We can create anchors in anywhere in the body. I can make this my anchor, and I can improvise around this anchor here. Work underneath the hand. The anchor is still there, pinned to the ground, and I just work around this particular anchor point. But that's an anchor. The body moves around it. So for more explanation with regards to the, this what's very isolated context, is hip dropping and what was the other one again? Closed hip escape. Sorry, heard it called many things. The closed hip escape. You're working with this idea of anchors and displacing the mass of the body around them. It's a huge concept, which massive bodies of research you can find around it in different areas, whether that's things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whether that's stuff like, contemporary floor contact work. But we have one applied scenario, which these are two exercises, these two, open hip drop and closed hip escape. And then we have presented the concept in the neck loading and foot shoulder anchors. Okay. Getting into back switch and hole. You're just going to have to practice your hole. And again, elasticity. If you were practicing the low bridge from other phases, now is the time to get it bouncy. Okay, so we can work here. This is fine, but again, same idea with the sissy squat. Same idea with the low bridge. What we're looking for is loaded tension here, like a bow. It's loaded with tension. It's bouncy. I can bounce on. And this relies on the elasticity of the anterior chain, which can be built for those basic contexts, such as the sissy squat, the low bridge, and now we're using an applied context. So that would be the case if you're doing what I've called the direct switch, when you switch directly from one side to the other. That's what you would need to start developing, rather than having that static kind of hold here and switching over, just like the pulsing with a boing, boing, boing. Now we want the elasticity, not on the posterior chain, on the anterior chain, on the other side. So I can nice and elastic, and that will allow you to get that direct switch. That's just a project to dig into. You might need a little bit of space with that, but it's also just one switch. I could practice it quite easily here and have done. Low-gait balance. Again, we're visiting this place of being loaded in deep knee flexion. And again, we've got the intrinsic work of the foot being done here. The foot to work. And we spoke all those same things we applied when we spoke about in the bilateral variation with the hinge and fold. It's there. It's so just see these small connections with the program. There's some thought went into this. So we have now this bilateral variation, which is not only developing your structural awareness, your balance and stability here. Your structural awareness and your balance, but the stability is also being developed through the conditioning of the knee in this very, very lowest of low gait positions. One thing I will say is that don't use the support on the wall. Don't use your hand on the wall. If you really need to, from here, use just a foot tap, the tapping of the foot. The reason being, this is not really in the same direction of how you would intrinsically support yourself. You would intrinsically support yourself from internally in this type of plane here. It's a very weak argument, to be honest, from my side for not using the wall, but trust me, if you're working here, you will with a wall or something, you will have an innate intrinsic lean towards this side, and it will conflict on the micro level within your form. But if you're working straight up and just working with the foot tapping on the floor, then you have much more this chance of starting to be able to bring it off the floor. A last resort, I've seen people that are just really kind of chunky legged and restricted. As a last resort, you can kind of work with the hands on the side of it, like stabilizers, and have 3-point assisted support. Yeah, in all honesty, if you're really restricted like that, I would just encourage you to invest first in the dragon squat, the classic dragon squat from this programs before. And the dragon squat will give you the experience in that deep knee flexion loaded. And then after spending perhaps 6 weeks with that again until the dragon squat at its drop set, the drop set being the 30, 30, 20, 20, 10, 10. So I'm spending 30 seconds and 20 seconds and 10 seconds each side alternating. When that starts to feel very, very easy, then this context should just be easy to approach immediately from that point. Ostrich walk, again, elasticity, pulsing. It's described in the resource quite extensively, and I believe that's getting quite clear now, this texture of elasticity that we want to develop. As I said, as with the other context, if you feel that's quite a lot for you at the moment, the ostrich walking with that, with the pulsing, if you feel you're not quite there, you can also just switch that in again for your for breathing statically in the pike position, standing or seated. That's also absolutely fine. Hinging straddle-bow as well. I've just underlined hinging. It's the key word here. Again, and I mentioned it as well when we're developing pancake ranges, hinge. Again, this is because I want to develop the pattern for the hinge, but I also want to know where is my most maximally hinged position. You have to think about it. The origin for the parts of the hamstrings, it's basically on the bottom of your butt here. So when I have an anterior tilt, that's the most maximal stretch these hamstrings are going to get. I cannot stretch it any more than that. If I round my back, it's actually releasing a lot of the tension on the hamstrings. If I even go into slight hyperextension, which is fine in this context because we're not significantly loaded, you're going to have the maximal tension across the hamstrings and the maximal potential development. As soon as the back starts to round, again, this is just fantasy rangeland. It's not where you are. So when you're working with this context, it's the same idea as the hinge and fold. Where is your hinge position, bro? Where is the current maximal range of your posterior chain? Referring here mostly pretty much to the hamstrings and the hips. What's the range that you have? Not working with the rounding of the back. This is a very nice progressive scenario, especially with the variations here. Working with the isometric holds on the bottom. I mean, 6 times 5 seconds isometric holds on the bottom. If you're new to this scenario, it's something quite challenging. Developing towards pulsing with, again, the option to hold the last rep for 20 to 30 seconds. I would consider this more range development. And then lastly, when you're going through 6 to 10 reps, I would personally recommend those reps once you've kind of built and understand exactly where your range is. And now we're approaching that concept of building strength through that range with concentric repetitions, as opposed to those eccentrics that we were using. Eccentrics is isometric holds. Good. Bridge, walking, gymnastics, bridge, they're completely self-explanatory. I would just say with the bridge wall walk, this is not a non-intrusive context. Bridge walking can be quite, wall walking can be quite, scary for your lower back, man. So really take it sensitively, and as it describes in the resource, stay really tight on your anterior chain. And this will, again, help promote you that idea of coordinating. How can I lean back and stay tight at the same time? And this will, okay, you may not be able to go as deep in the range as you would if you just relaxed it, but at the same time, you're developing the tensile elasticity of the anterior chain as well, which is everything we just spoke about with things such as the back switch, and also we'll see with things like the sissy squat as well, and even the low bridge. There's an aspect of anterior chain tension. So I'm talking about the midsection, this idea of the ribs down, staying a bit tight. To support reaching back. And but confidence will improve with that over time. And as you do develop with that, you can start working towards the gymnastics bridge, which again is explained in the resource. It's not the same as the high bridge. And the reason is that we're emphasizing pushing into the upper back, so more the thoracic as opposed to the lower back. And to achieve this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a slightly wider form. So again, it's this idea of knowing ourselves structurally. As a normal high bridge, I would be here, but my gymnastics bridge, I'm going to extend those legs a little bit further. And now when I push from the legs, it goes into my upper back more, as opposed to in my lower back here. A nice tip with this to stabilize the shoulders, and I don't think it's written in the resource, internal rotation. Oh, weird one, yeah. So external rotation when we're pressing forward in a protracted form. But essentially in this gymnastics bridge, to stabilize the shoulders, we want to do the opposite. When we slightly internally rotate, I'm squeezing the shoulder blades together and they're staying nice and tight against the upper rib cage, and also emphasizing that press of the thoracic spine into extension. So if you imagine the shoulder blades coming down the back here, and then when I reach back, they help open that upper back as well. You can also do this on the wall when you're reaching back and you find a hold position. Just kind of screw the hands in just slightly so you feel the shoulder blades tighten, and this will add significantly to the stability of that particular movement. The last thing I'll touch on, your V-sit pike compression. Have fun with that. Stick with it. Trust me. The last thing I'll speak about is the reach back, floor entrance and exit, and the emptying and softening. Now, if you work with the other programs of just floor entrance and exit, you will have that idea there already, how to enter and exit the floor. But now we have a certain coordinative aspect to this, which is it's a figure eight. It's a figure eight. It's not simply reaching back, going in one side, and coming out the other side. This is fine. This is fine. But we add a fundamental pattern in there, the figure eight. I'm going in one side. I enter the floor on the other side, exit the other side. Weight shift across the back side, the right side, and again. So notice what happened there. I went in one side. Now I'm drawing the figure eight around. Now I need to draw the middle of the eight back on the other side. And then I come out again. So if you've been performing it, just coming back, coming into the floor, then out the other side, review it. And lastly, we can add to that this idea of feet anchors, foot anchors. Because what I'm actually doing to achieve this reach back, so it's not like that, is I'm pushing from the feet. I slide myself back, and I even pull with the hand as well here to achieve that. Likewise, when I exit, I'm going to pull with the feet, the anchors, heel hook, pull to help me out. So then I don't have to, and this is a common mistake, one in which I feel I have to bring myself back, hold it, and then come down. No. It's much more slide than that. You slip in like that. Oh yeah, back out. And that's what we're looking to develop. But it involves the anchors pushing and pulling with the hands and the feet to facilitate that reach back, floor entrance and exit. We had just one question here from Lucas with regards to how would you alternate between phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3? How would you alternate between phase 1, 2, and 3? So one thing that's important to mention, and Neil, if you have to shoot, don't worry, mate. I'll just answer this question for Lucas. So how would you alternate between phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3? The first thing I'll say is that even though they are not progressive, they are interconnected. The ideas and some of the concepts, some of the ranges we use in different ways. I'm a very big fan of exposure to movement contexts and ideas. For example, entering, exiting the floor, or shoulder extension, or hinging, or anchors, these ideas, and then presenting many, many different contexts that actually they have those ideas in there. And the more experience you have around it, the more you'll be able to understand that concept, rather than saying, okay, see this one, this is the one. AG hold, that's the one for shoulder extension. There it is. It's like, well, no, because I can do shoulder extension unilaterally as well. I can do it closed chain, I can do it open chain. That helps develop not only your understanding of the idea, but also your physiological experience. So with regards to then these similar concepts, how would you alternate between them? Well, first of all, I would advise, if you haven't already, to work with, the phase how I would propose to anyone that's working with me individually through something like online support. Take 12 to 16 weeks with one phase. 12 to 16 weeks with one phase. That means that one phase you would break up into two separate phases of that phase, of either 6 weeks each, which would then be your 12 weeks, or 8 weeks each, which would then be your 16 weeks. Now, between those two, you should aim to develop your variables or the progression, or the progressive variation, which basically means for the first 6 weeks, I'll work, just say, let's say I'll just do for the first 6 weeks, I'm just doing the breathing in my front folding pike, front folding pike. I stick with that. Even if it starts to feel simple and easy, I stick with just the breathing for that 6 weeks and I work on that. I make a few notes at the end. I was like, okay, that breathing was getting really easy. Now I think I can go for 50 pulses. I'll go for a little test, see how that feels. Yeah, 50 is fine. Or maybe it's like, no, that's still super easy. I'll do 75. And then I'll choose that for the next few weeks, for the next part of that phase. The same with the variables here. If I'm working, say, for example, 45 seconds of ostrich walking in the first part of that phase, the first 6 or 8 weeks. And in the beginning, it was challenging. But by the end, 45 seconds is nothing. I might ramp it up and do, okay, next time I'm always going to work between 60 and 90 seconds. It's going to be 60 and 90 seconds. Work that 12 to 18 week phase with that developmental split between the phase, okay? And then after that, explore the next phase, daily practice phase 2, and work the same idea. Take 12 to 18 weeks, so it's 12 to 16 weeks, and between that split, so between 6 weeks and 6 weeks, or 8 weeks and 8 weeks, then increase some of the variables, develop some of the progressions where necessary, write a few notes down, because some things you might not develop in. You'll find them very, very challenging, but you don't want to just keep beating that dead horse and try and make it move. So I'll work that phase, and then for the next one, then I'll do daily practice phase 3. Once you've done the same thing with daily practice phase 3, you will go back and you'll pick up daily practice phase 1, working from the variables at the levels that you finished that before. So this could be now like 6 months later, but this is absolutely fine, because what you'll find, because of those interconnections between the phases, not the same context, but different perspectives on the same ideas, contexts, and concepts, that you'll go back and the variables at which you finished at your maximum for that phase 1, you'll go back, you'll probably try those for 1 week and be like, man, these are easy. I worked out something either in my body, either something developed in terms of capacity, or some movement pattern that was drilled again the circles, the figure eights, the waves, my understanding of weight shifting, my general structural awareness. It's developed these underlying things that are transferable and affect so many different movement contexts that when you go back to phase one, it's likely you'll do one week of practice with the maximum variables from before, and you'll immediately see, you know what, 90 seconds of ostrich walking is no problem, and I can most definitely do these 100 pulses in pike. Or you'll find, you know, with that QDR rotational push-up and that bridge rotation from phase one, I can actually now, because of the shoulder work and the other ones, I can do X number of repetitions more, and I'm on a higher progression, or whatever it is. So that's personally how I would advise alternating between those phases. Take them 1, 2, and 3, then go back to the beginning, take the information with you, build it up again, and that'll work cyclically like that. From that point, from there, or at any point where you feel like, okay, I've outgrown this practice, that can happen. It becomes like very familiar with you, or you just get really bored of the context or something like this. Of course, you can then start to take pieces from each and then put it into your own succinct program. If you do that, if you, as I say, you feel you've exhausted those scenarios, I would encourage you, unless you have personal experience and your own perspectives on programming, just use the structure. Use the same structure. Use some of the common sense. Okay, there's like bent arm, straight arm. There's like some flexion stuff, then extension. There's some push stuff and pull. There's some rotational things here. With the large frame mobility, we've got front folding. We've got, leg abduction work, legs apart. All these different things in there. You can use that as a template to develop your own individual daily practice with the tools from all previous phases, or, for example, things you would like to inject in there that you have experience with already. Yeah. See, this is also something as well. So Lucas has just referred to, not focusing just on higher progressions, but, sticking with them for a longer period of time. Yeah, definitely. And because this comes with something that's much more fundamental in terms of movement perspective, which is the perspective of progress. What is progress? And this is a hugely philosophical question. Like, you can dig into this a lot. Like, what do we mean when we're talking about progress? What is the assumption here? That everything just gets better and better? Because, yeah, I mean, we can reflect on this kind of socially, economically, historically, with our world. And yeah, there are certain things that have developed in a linear progressive line, but there's certain things that have not. If we take that perspective of it being better, but then how do we measure better? So we need to be quite specific when we're talking about what are we doing here, which is why many people I work with, I'm like, look, don't focus on progress. Progress just happens naturally. Any organic thing that is growing, whether that's a human being, it's a child, or whether it's weather formations, or whether it's the environment, or whether it's the economy, there's no linear progressive thing like this. It never goes like this. And if you're waiting for it to happen on that, and you think, oh, I go to the next step, you're just going to be shot down when it doesn't happen. So expect that it should go like this. That's how recovery from injury works as well. It develops and goes back. Yeah, and things like impatience, as you mentioned, yeah, this is something that's built into that idea, but actually it all comes back to this idea that stuff just gets better and better and better. This is the linear approach. And I mentioned this quite vehemently in a video. I said that, I'm not here to help you progress. It's not what I offer this stuff for. I want to try and help you grow. And there's a difference between progression and growth. When you've got a plant, I've got a nice bonsai here. This is Victor Bonsai, who's been growing. Now, Victor Bonsai, he didn't look like this when I got him. He was smaller, yeah, but he hasn't grown in one direction out here. He hasn't just grown. Ooh, this guy's been growing left, right, center, bits and bobs, wherever he can grow, generally towards the light. But the idea is that with this practice here, these daily practices, these physical practices, Neil mentioned it as well. There's still many things that he wants to develop, but that's entirely the point. If these were things, it was like, okay, I got to that weight now, I got it, now it's done. Great, you did it, and now you don't have to practice anymore. And that completely defies the point of having a daily practice, because you need something to practice. So just the idea that I don't just grow linearly. I grow and I gather experience. I swallow it, I take it, and I carry it with me. So when I come back to that same scenario again, the scenario didn't change. The movement context does not change. What changes? Me. I change. And now we have huge opportunity to then reflect and look in the mirror. How have I changed? Because it's like that thing, you know, let's say if you're working on body composition, the changes are so small. You look in the mirror every day if that's your game, if you're a bodybuilder or something like this, but you don't really notice the changes because it's just daily small bits. But then someone who hasn't seen you for a while, you go back and see that friend. It's the same context. Wow, you've changed a lot. So it's the same idea. We practice, we take some time away from it, we gather things, we continue to grow, but then we go back there again. It's the same as when we visit an old place, our old place that we live, we visit old friends and we notice how we have changed. And this is why I say that the movement context is always loyal. The movement context is always there. It never changes, but it allows you to plug yourself in and reflect on how you have changed over time. And that's something very, very, very powerful. And it's invaluable information, whether it's for physical practice or just being a better human being and reflecting on what have you developed, how have you developed, and how have you changed in that time away from that context.